Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brain Bean here again, back with another PC build video for you. Now, the theme of today's build is to not only build a PC that costs $650, because we certainly could build a value, best bang for your buck build for a little bit cheaper, but I also wanted to have a build that had the ability to expand on in the future without having to rip and replace all of the parts. So if you've got a little bit of extra budget, it might not be a bad idea to pick up some parts that will allow you to grow the system rather than rip and replace. So let's take a look at what we actually have going into this system. So for our CPU, we have the Ryzen 5 2600. Now this one is going to cost you about $165, and we certainly could have gone with something like the Ryzen 2200 or the 2400 APUs, but I specifically wanted the Ryzen 5 just because we get a couple of extra cores, and if we want to do something like streaming or video editing, we've got a little bit more horsepower for that, as well as it's a solid CPU for gaming. Now moving on to the motherboard, we've got the MSI Gaming B450. Now, we certainly could have gone with a smaller board if we didn't want to go with like a full ATX board, but I thought for the extra $20, we get the 4 DIMM slots instead of 2, and you also have the ability to have the 2 different PCIe slots. So for me, it was an easy choice to upgrade and get a little bit bigger board. For our GPU, we're using the RX 570 Red Devil. Now, this is a really good card for about $150, and compared to what NVIDIA's got going on right now with the 1650, for the same price, the RX 570 is going to crank out almost 30% more power, so it's a no-brainer. For a really good budget card, we're going with the RX 570. For our memory, we were a little bit limited because we did most of our shopping locally at Fry's. So we've got the Corsair Vengeance 3200 megahertz, 2 8 gig sticks. Now this ran us about $104. You certainly could find something if you went with your RAM a little bit slower for a bit cheaper. And also, this doesn't necessarily match the color theme of our build, as pretty much everything is red and black and this memory is white. But again, we were pretty limited with what we were going to work with. We wanted to get something going today. And I'm also thinking we might do some custom acrylic CPU shroud or power supply shrouds and things like that. So we may work in some white into the theme that way too. And then for storage options, instead of going with an M.2 drive, mainly just to save money, we went with a Patriot Burst 120 gig SSD. You can get these on Amazon for like $18. So it's a super cheap way to get at least some kind of solid state drive in your PC for your operating system and 1 or 2 games that you find that you play a lot or don't want much loading times. And then we went with a good old-fashioned Western Digital Blue 1 terabyte drive. This is just good for dumping all of your pictures and videos and a bunch of games and stuff like that on it. You can grab one of these for $50. And then lastly, for the case, we've got a standard Rosewill ATX case. You can get this thing for about $29 on Amazon. You still get a little small acrylic panel on the side, and it does come with a couple of fans. For about $30, it's a good size mid-tower case. And lastly, for the power supply, we're using a Thermaltake Gold 750 watt power supply. It is a modular power supply as well, which if you're really trying to save money, and especially for this build, we could have gone with a lower wattage, and we also could have gone with a non-modular power supply. The main reason we chose to spend a little bit money on the power supply now is that if we choose to upgrade our video card later, and just for ease of use, the modular cables is a much cleaner, and also having the bigger power supply now not only ensures a stable system with that gold rated power supply, but also if we get a bigger video card later, we don't have to also rip out and replace the power supply, which if you guys have built computers, is kind of a pain in the butt when you got to rewire the whole system. Now that we've looked at all the individual components, let's get on with the build. Alright, so we're getting ready to install the video card now, but we ran into a little bit of a snag because this case, because it is a little bit cheaper, it doesn't have enough headroom at the top, not only to not install fans, but that also means that there's no channel that we can route the cable for the CPU power header on the motherboard. So what we're going to have to do, I want to try to still keep the cables as nice as possible because there is a small acrylic window in this. Is just to run that cable as much off to the side to hide it as possible. And there is a little bit of room on the video card, so I think we're going to be able to hide it decently this way. And with the smaller window, it'll probably work. Ideally, for cables and everything, you know, we want to have them as clean as possible. But when we're trying to save money on the case and keep cost as a main factor here, you know, you are going to have to sacrifice some aesthetics, obviously, but we'll see how we can do and hopefully clean it up and make it look pretty good. I mean, it's not ideal, but at least that cable is running through this little cutout in the card right there, which is good. And we can kind of tuck this in, and then if we end up building like an acrylic power supply shroud for this, we could make a small cutout for it. And I don't think it looks all that bad. For what we paid for it, I think it's not bad. Alright guys, so now that we've got the system built, I'm going to take a few minutes to clean up all the mess on the desk and also clean up all the cables and get both the side panels on. And then we will obviously throw Windows on there and start benchmarking some games. So let's get to it. Alright, so now we're benchmarking on some Overwatch, just trying to get an idea of how it runs, because the main games on this system being played are going to be Overwatch and Apex. So just in running around here and testing it out, we're getting an average of about 140 frames on 1080p, which obviously with this kind of card, we're not going to be doing any like 4K or 1440p or anything like that. So, you know, average of 140 frames in my mind for a $150 graphics card is pretty damn good. So, I'm pretty happy with the performance of it so far. But let's hop over to Apex and we'll see how it's doing there. Alright, so now we're playing some Apex Legends. We just jumped in here. Looks like our average frame rate running around inside is about 120 frames. Outside it drops down a little bit into the hundreds. Now keep in mind that the settings that I have it set to right now are probably low to medium. They're kind of the recommended competitive settings that most people use to kind of get rid of all the extra particles and foliage and stuff like that that makes it harder to see people. So if you follow normal settings like that at 1080p, I mean, this is kind of the performance that you can expect to get. A couple of dips down here into the 90s, but then jumps kind of right back up into the low to mid hundreds, somewhere around 110 to 130, which again is pretty damn good performance, better than what I was expecting. Well, there you have it, guys. For 650 bucks, this PC's performing better than I expected it to be honest. Now, we are just doing 1080p gaming, but that's what we wanted to buy it for in the first place. And sure, we could have tested it on some more games, but really, these are the games that we built this system to play. And so that's kind of what we were looking to really test it on. You know, there were a couple of parts in this build, like I mentioned, that maybe we could have lowered them so that we're a little bit cheaper, so that we could have spent a little bit more money on the GPU, maybe gone with like a 580 or a 590. But for what we're getting just on these games at max settings on Overwatch, and then, you know, mid to low on Apex, which is what most people play on anyways, pretty happy with what we're getting. And considering the cost and having the ability to upgrade this system, I'm pretty happy with where it ended up. So with that, guys, let me know in the comments down below what you think about this build and maybe what you would have done different. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like to show your support. If you want a list of all the parts that were in this build, I'll have them down in the description for you, as well as links so that you can check out those parts for yourselves. And of course, if you're new here on the channel, I'd love to see you subscribe, as I've got a lot more videos like this coming for you in the near future. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.